Oh, okay. There it finally went live. And I just posted to the Discord that we are live. So I'm going to start out today, as I noted in the chat, with a brief diversion into the world of screenwriting software. Here's why. You can, like, for example, in OpenOffice, like a long time ago, you could argue that with screenplay software, I'm kind of solving a problem that doesn't need to be solved, because a long time ago I created a template for OpenOffice that allows me to hit, like Control 1 or Control 2 or 3 or whatever to format in proper screenplay fashion. So, and there's plenty of tools out there. Some are fairly expensive. Some are not expensive, meaning what, maybe a couple $100 or whatever. Anyway, it always kind of bugged me that being able to write in the browser is kind of cool, because you can do it from anywhere, right? From any machine, any place. So back around between 10 and 15 years ago, there was a program that got a little bit of traction, and that program was called Celtx, CELTX. And basically that was what I'm talking about. It was an in-browser editor, screenplay editor, and I bring it up mainly because if you're going to be creating cartoons, well, at some point you have to write a screenplay, right? So anyway, Celtx was pretty cool. It wasn't perfect. It had a few bugs, but the interesting thing about Celtx was what they did was they essentially, hey Max Power, and hello to you too. So what they did when they created Celtx was they essentially hacked Firefox, and they forked Firefox and then turned Firefox into a custom application. But it wasn't a browser. It was actually just a standalone application. So what I did, I'd started this a long time ago, but I really didn't make it work nicely until like over the weekend. So here's the gist of it. Running on my local server. So in my office, I run a web server. Okay, so that when I've got a website that's kind of in process for a client or something, I can work on it locally and then FTP it to the server. So what I did, I use a CMS, a really old school PHP based CMS called CM Simple. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is it's just an old school CMS that I know inside and out, and I can almost hack out any kind of look and feel you could want, in a website using this particular CMS. At the end of the day, today everything's pretty standardized anyway. But what I wanted to do was create essentially a website that is effectively the container for the editor for all my scripts. So for example, if I go to Fan Futurama, over here there's one script under that, which is Bender's Beauty Contest, and that's the screenplay I wrote for basically Fan Futurama. So the feature set is basically as follows. Number one, this is not going to be relevant to most people's interests, but the fact is that this application completely bypasses the CMS, because the CMS usually manages the content. The way I did it, as I said, no, we're going to load the content off the server, and then when I'm ready to save it, I'm just going to have the save button. Why did I do that? Because the whole idea is I want to be able to go to a page in the site, as it were, and immediately just start typing. I don't want to have to log in. I want to let the creative muses take me where they will. And so basically I wrote this application that lets me log in, immediately start writing. If I want to create a new slug line, for example, this is a new scene, I would hit Alt-Shift tilde, and boom, it's gonna go ahead and create a new slug line, right? This is going to be exposition, right here. So obviously it formats with whatever's surrounding it. So then I just hit Alt 4 and it turns it into exposition. So I've got basically Alt 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 does various kinds of formatting. There's a transition, there's exposition, there's parenthetical, dialogue, character. So it works just the way you'd want with hotkeys. And then the cool thing is it analyzes all the slug lines, it analyzes all the scenes in your script, and automatically generates all these bookmarks over here. And if you click on the bookmarks, then it'll go to that scene so you can work on it. So for me, that was kind of a killer feature. That previously what I did was I had it set up so that I could log in, and when I logged in, I could do the same thing here. So I could say Dave was here and make this a slug line using styles by custom programming the styles. But because of the way the CMS works, there was no way to really hack into this part, which is the FCK editor, without completely reverse engineering it, right? And really hacking it. So I figured out how to add custom styles, which I did, but it always bugged me having to, you write something and what the heck is going on, right? And then you say, well, that's exposition, right? So you just change it to exposition. To me, this is like the Mac user way of doing things. Everything's clicking, everything is slow, you're always having to reach for stuff. And anyway, I'm like, that's stupid. I want to just go to the script. I don't have to log in, I don't have to do anything. I just immediately start typing. I just go. And then I can format with my hotkeys. I don't have to push a bunch of buttons. The only buttons I'm pushing are when I'm ready to save. This will save it to the server. And as I say, it generates all the slug line bookmarks automatically, so you can jump from scene to scene. One thing that is not implemented, and I don't know if I'll bother, but could be useful, would be the idea to take these bookmarks and drag them and have the system literally rearrange the script. I remember Celtics had a feature kind of like that. You can also print it out as a PDF on like any modern browser, yada, yada, yada. So if anybody wanted this tool, I'm not hard to find, so you can message me and request it. Basically you need a locally running web server of some kind to run it off of. And then in the normal case, what you do is you go to your browser and you type in localhost. Just type localhost in your browser address bar, and if you have a web server running on your computer, it will pull up whatever that server is serving up. So then on the server, you would just create a folder probably called screenplay or something, and you just put the code base for the whole thing in that folder, and when you go to that folder, the software just runs, basically. So pretty cool. It was a good PHP and JavaScript exercise, and it's something I've actually been wanting to use for several years. I've wanted an in-browser screenplay editor for a long time, and so I'm like, okay, screw it. I'm going to take the weekend and write it myself. So there it is. Okay, so what's going on out there in the world? Well, nobody really cares. It looks like there's nobody here. So, okay, that's fine. Maybe it'll pick up a little later. Let's get back to the show. What's going on with the show? Well, basically what's going on is I haven't gotten a lot done over the weekend because this illustration / animation I've been doing for this AI tech startup has been consuming probably a little more time than I would prefer. Hopefully they'll get acquired by private equity and a big fat windfall will come my way, but I'm not holding my breath for that one. Anyway, so the last couple of weeks we've been doing all these shots with Tianara and Mel and Luca, and the kind of exciting, frankly, thing about this whole sequence is once I got into it and sort of found the workflow sweet spot, it went so fast. And the workflow sweet spot is this. Whoops, I just clicked the wrong button. In Blender, basically generate pencil test, ink, and paint. Render that out, bring it into Krita, and then in Krita, put it together with the backgrounds and any special effects that you want to add. That's been a really good workflow. And what happens is once I have the elements, like once you get into dialogue, for example, normally there's only like 3 or 4 shots. You know, you know what I'm saying? You go to those guys. There's a close up of Tia. There's a 3 shot. Back to the close up. 3 shot. Back to the 3 shot. Okay. Basically, the camera said, okay, instead of looking at Tia, I'm going to look at Luca. Both of them. Well, this doesn't fold in Melchizedek, but this one does. So now what are we up to? Like 3 or 4 different shots. And what I found was once the key shots were created, oh my goodness, I was shocked at how much I was able to just run these clips either in reverse or cut them into pieces and repaste them back together. Sometimes having like some dialogue happen, and then you would insert a still image from the image sequence in order to break it up and change the timing. And the crazy thing is, once the key shots were done, doing the additional shots, either the easy way, which is, as I say, just drag and drop it in Vegas and run it in reverse, for example. That would be the simplest. Another thing would be coming into Krita and saying, well, I mean, we've got the basic shot, like there it is, and that's the second shot we've used for this sequence I'm working on right now. And, so sometimes there's little things I'll do in Krita, like I might separate, I believe I separated out his eyebrows. I might have done that in Blender. I don't remember right now. I don't want to look real close, but it'd be something like, well, let's put the eyebrows in their own layer so that the guy can scowl, or something like that. And which in fact he did. I think that was done in Blender though. Probably, yeah, with sculpting, and then the going back as far as possible would be to go back to Blender, and deal with it there. So there's the. Anyway, this workflow has been proven to be it's stable. It's effective, and it's fast. So what can I say about that? You can't argue with it. And there we are. So now we're at this silhouette shot. That's the most, I guess I'd say the most latest one, which is this. I put the little rim lights on them in Krita. And so that's where we're at. I'll turn on the preview so that I don't have to switch screens, because I always switch screens and then forget that I switched, and then you guys are complaining in the chat that I'm on the wrong screen. So this is basically Vespar in the tavern ranting. What I'm looking at right now is I'm looking at my background paintings to just viscerally assess by watching it, having not looked at it in a while, if this right here is jolting. I would say it is. Mainly because the scale of the bricks is wrong. The scale of the bricks they're just too big. So, all right, that means I wanna fix that. Okay, so I'm gonna take a moment and see if there's anything going on. Hey, Tom doing art. Boy, am I glad I'm glad I decided to stay on this screen, because you're the one guy I definitely do not want to have around when I'm being sloppy and failing to switch screens. Okay, so that's sharp, that's blurred, so this is basically nothing. So I think what I'm going to do, let's try it this way. There's more than one way to skin the cat. I'm just going to try something. Okay, it looks like we've got, let me see here. Okay, so we could probably give ourselves a little bit more latitude this way, perhaps by increasing the amount of yellow. Okay, because the idea, if we go back to the show, the thing is, I got to be cognizant of the fact that he's got a window that's behind him, and it looks like Vespar doesn't. So if you look at this shot, the window is basically over here. So if we're gonna do it this way, let me see something. Okay, the good news is that this is fairly uniform in color other than the pink at the top. So, just bear with me here for half a second, folks. So what I'm gonna do is I first want to test whether I know what to do to solve the lighting issue. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and just say, okay, in this corner, if there is light coming through, this is where it would be coming through from. Okay, let's do screen mode maybe. And yes, that feels pretty good. We can ease that in. That's not bad. Let's turn off the erase. Okay, and now what I want to do is I'm going to isolate that layer. I really actually want to, oops, get my hotkeys mixed up. Okay. You know, frankly, the simplest way to do what I'm trying to do right now is just blur it. Just go like this. Boop. Just blur it. Perfect. Cool. Yep, that's what I wanted. All right, and then I can crank it up if I want to. Crank it up or down. And with the curves applied to the alpha, I can increase and decrease the contrast as well. I can really dial that in. I mean, the extreme of what I'm showing here would be to just go like this, where you reduce it to a hard line. Get the idea? So that's that. Okay. Question, is this therefore even needed? No, hell no, that's not needed. Let's get rid of it. Okay. If we make this intense, just so you know what I was saying about the curves, that's why. Because if I want to make it more intense, then I would want to take the alpha and just dial it back. You see what I'm saying? See how you can control that? That's very cool. Okay. And so now what that did was effectively separated the concern of the window from the concern of the wall. Therefore, now, let's go from this corner. I'm going to hit Shift, and let's just crank the scale down. Okay, now what we're going to do, now that we've cranked the scale down, is I am going to see if we can cobble something. Okay, the first thing, obviously, we'd want to do is flip it upside down. Let's flip it so that we've got the right basic color scheme at the bottom. And I would say that's pretty good. All right, so let's double that again. And smack it up here. Dude, I'm thinking that looks pretty good. Boop, boop. And now if we want to go in and soften things up a bit, we can. How would we do that? Well, in my case, I happen to have on my hot list of brushes a very gentle, if you turn the opacity down, very gentle blurring kind of thing. So I'm just going to go in and touch up. Truth is, most people aren't going to really be noticing, you know, the sharpness or whatever. So I'm going to turn this way down and make this much bigger. Yeah, we just want a little bit of a gentle blur there. Okay, and obviously we got a problem right there we'll have to fix. Okay, so now, are we flipped? Yeah, okay. I'm just wondering why I'm seeing, oh, I know why. It's because this, yeah, this is actually much larger than the screen. So in this case, actually, now that I just did that, does it turn out we could do this? Flip this a little to the left, and then let's just stretch the bricks. Let's just stretch them. You know, what's the big deal? So image, we'll trim it to the image size and say, okay, so now, looking at the comments, the dark black lines may make it stronger than it should be. Are you, that was at 11:08. Are you referring to, I'm not sure what you're referring to there actually. Makes the wall, punch up saturation and the black lines are darker than the figures. Oh, I see. Yeah, it's, I actually wrestled with that a bit with these guys, making them not transparent obviously, but just making them lighter. It could be that this is better. I'm not actually sure I like this at all. Let me see. The tint, I don't know. To tell you the truth, I think I would like to. I'm going to hit Control M. Sorry. Go here. Control M. I want to play with that. And I'll just make it a filter mask because then I can fiddle with it at my leisure. But the idea would be to tighten this up a bit. Okay, yeah, so this would want to actually be here. I'm going to reset that. Okay, so this kind of tightens it, and then this clamps it back. I am going to put that on there and just see if I like it. And then, in addition, I would probably make this something like that is what I think I'm looking for. Can you just fade the brick outlines a little? So you're really having an issue with the lines in the wall. Well, I mean, okay. How would you fix that? It's not easy, actually, but I'll show you what I would do. If I said, that's seriously a problem, then I think the way I would solve it is I take this copy and probably invert it first. I'm just looking at the classic factors of what makes an image element advance or recede. Okay, let me just look at this. You know, obviously and that's definitely wanting to be turned down a bit. Obviously a blur is kind of an obvious thing to do. Let's see. So yeah, we'll add that as a filter mask, just in case we decide. Wait a minute. Yeah, I guess that's right. That does help punch up the characters a bit. I'm feeling like that feels close. And having done that kind of makes this somewhat more irrelevant, honestly. I think I'm just going to stick with what I had in the first place, and then we can argue about how bright it needs to be. Hey, Chiziapo. Well, another thing, by the way, that you could do in this case that I think would maybe be quite nice would be to go ahead and give these guys some shadows. Obviously, I think it's obvious anyway, that helps. In fact, it helps enough that I'm not going to mess with the lines, actually. I'm just going to say, let's go with the blur. But I think maybe even more interestingly would be to add a transform mask to this. And then we would be, probably something like that. Okay. For our purposes, golly, it's tempting to just bake it in, but we'll see. So let's go ahead and put some shadows in there, and then we'll call this this is their cast shadow. Just gives it a little bit more character, I think. And if we make this just a little smaller, whoops, I'm editing the wrong thing right now. Well, it just goes to prove, don't ever fail to label your, your God, I don't know what to call it. Transform. Okay. Yeah, so what I was getting at is maybe make this just a little bit smaller so we get a little bit more of a hint of Vespar's shadow as well. So that looks pretty good. Boo-doo, boo, ba-doo, boo. No shadows. Little bit of shadows. So this is what do I want to say here? A bit silly in the sense that, and by the way, I am going to bake this down. Probably the safest way to do it would be to take this and put it in a group. Yeah, merge the group. Otherwise, you don't necessarily have great control over the order in which things happen, and some effects or blending modes or something can kind of get lost in translation. So, I'm liking that. I'm gonna run with that for the moment. Not sweat it too much. This is 91D. Yep. Okay. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I'm always looking for ways to make it just a little bit better. So, yeah, it'll work. That shot's not going to make the show, that's for sure, but let's keep moving forward. And what we want to do now, on the sketch layer, I have the dialogue. So this is Tobias says, Destiny is a funny thing. Okay. By the way, Blender friends and fans, I learned over the weekend, I'm like, is there a way to avoid having to do this? Okay. So, Alt-A. Is there a way to avoid this? Because look how fiddly it is, trying to select all these keyframes, and then you got to select all except this one, and then how do you deselect if you accidentally selected too many? Well, it turns out that there is an answer, and it's pretty simple actually. And the answer is the you know the bracket keys that are to the right of the P key on your keyboard? So the uppercase would be like C style brackets for a function or something, and the lowercase are like square brackets. Well, it turns out if you hit the right square bracket, it selects everything to the right. No mistakes, no fuss, no nothing, and you just move it downstream. So that's what I've been doing as I work now, especially since I learned that little hotkey, is just whatever I'm working on, just move everything else downstream and just let it evolve as it evolves. Okay. It appears to me, by the way, this zone down here, if I select from there, I would actually call this a bug or an error in the program. Why? Because if I click here, let me see something. Let's say I click here. Okay, well that has a function. What if I click here? Nothing. If I click here, nothing. Okay, so it's not like I'm seeing a square lasso as a default function of the windowing system, right? Okay, where am I going with this? Well, if the way that you grab hotkeys is to do a square lasso, then if you can't actually select the keys unless you're on the gray, in other words, you're in between these two blue strips, then it shouldn't be possible to draw that lasso at all. It shouldn't be possible. Why am I seeing a lasso if the lasso isn't going to actually do something? So that's just an example I give, because a lot of times you guys know I kind of rant about software. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. And to be fair, I want a true disclosure here. This is kind of important. That screenwriting software that I showed you that I wrote over the weekend, the one thing I did not do, I must confess, is I didn't add the option to roll your own hotkeys. Okay, just saying. because the software is basically for me, and I know what my hotkeys are. But if I was releasing such a thing as a commercial program, OMG, I would be really down on myself for not giving people the ability to have a simple text file to generate hotkeys. Okay, so I'm having a brain fart here. Oh yeah, so it would be Control Home. There we go. And then let's just take a guess here. 30 frames, I guess. Control End, and then that's now our range. Okay, cool. Okay, curly brace, yeah. So as far as moving keys around, I thought that was pretty useful. Definitely. Okay, so he okay, well actually this is a good example of where okay, right hand square brace. Look at that, isn't that cool? So now after doing this, I realized I want to be able to more readily see what's next, so I guess I don't need to move things around that much. The good thing though is that by using the square brackets, I know for a fact that everything downstream is selected. Be aware, you do not probably want to do large scale, no pun intended, scaling of your keys. Okay? Okay, so let me show you what I'm talking about. All right? If I set my cursor here, or my playhead, I guess, and I hit the S key to scale, I can scale the keys in the same sense that you can scale anything else in a 3D app. So, if you have quick and dirty pencil test keyframes like I have here that are too close together, sometimes it's a useful strategy to just scale them and spread them out. Well, when you only have a couple, or you're only working with a very limited range, that's fine. The thing you want to be aware of though is that when Blender scales keyframes, it kind of has an algorithm that, for lack of a better explanation, I'll say it's gradual, in that it has to say, look, you're not going in perfect increments of 1, 2, 4, 8, you know. Who knows how much you're going to scale it. So if you watch these keys down here at the bottom, I'm trying to point at them while I'm doing it. So, but the keys right here, if you watch them closely, you'll see that the way they spread out kind of has an algorithm to it, where Blender has to decide, well, which ones do I move when, based on how I'm scaling. Okay, so this works really, really well, but it's sufficiently uncertain what you're creating that if you tried to do that to your whole thing, to just like spread it out so that maybe instead of playing it, you know, to just slow everything down, the results are going to be a little bit dicey. Okay, it's going to be hard to get a certain sort of result. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. And generally, if you're going to monkey with keys, do it within a limited range that, you know, you can see what you're doing and hit undo if you need to, right? So I just thought I'd kind of make that point. All right, so this is like, he's going, boom. Yeah, I mean, that's probably okay. All right, so is this and this... Actually, let me check something. There's something I'm concerned about. Okay, I remember that I changed his... okay. What I was wondering is I'd done a little bit of a fix up on his shoulders because they were kind of positioned weirdly, and I wasn't sure if that change had propagated downstream, so it looks like it did. Okay, so now the question becomes, do we... I know for a fact that the... sorry guys, sorry, forgive me for being so tongue-tied. Let me slow down here. Let me slow down and think. Okay. The eyebrows are definitely drawn in this frame. This is, I'm 99% sure this is not a sculpting thing. Okay. Why do I mention that? Well, if the clip starts, then I want to have a little bit of a tween. So I'm going to hit Shift D to move these keys downstream. And then what I'm going to do is go here. Okay, and it actually needs to be back one. I only want one tween. Okay, so then in draw mode, I can go to my individual layers and go Control-Shift-E, and Blender is going to generate the tweens for me, which is great. So then the only question is, well, do I want to add an extra keyframe here? Notice something interesting. Right here, this is actually a great opportunity to do a little bit of a refactor. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the sketch layer so that it's not, if I make a selection here in edit mode, it's not going to select stuff from the sketch layer. Moreover, I want to go down over the timeline and hit the tilde key, which causes whatever is the currently active layer to be selected, and everything else is locked. Isolate, basically, solo the layer, as it were. Okay, why did I do that? Well, I want to take, I see a mistake. The eyebrows, let's see. Okay, that's cool. I don't know if I'm going to get so lucky over here. So I'm going to hit the M key, and I had created this layer for eyebrows. So those really should be moved there. And then let me see what I can do. I'm going to hit, oh man. I guess I did get lucky. Okay, so now if I turn the eyebrows layer back on, yeah, I mean, it's probably worth noting that this really probably should also be, let's hit the L key and see what we have. Yeah, that's fine, right? L key is select linked. That means if I select one little vertex of a grease pencil stroke, the L key means any other vertices that are connected to that one also get selected. So now all I'm doing here is this is just due diligence, cleanup. Moving his eyebrows over to this eyebrow layer, which I did specifically so that, I'll show you why. Actually, here's what I'll do. Let me make a duplicate of this key right there. Okay? This is the destination, and this is the tween. So the problem we do have, notably, is that I did have them kind of drawn in the other layer, but I'm not going to worry about that right now, because if I hit the G key and just realign these, there we go. So now here's the key to the magic, is hit the tilde key over the timeline, the grease pencil, I should say, dope sheet. Now I can go ahead and have my way with the eyebrows without worrying about any of the other layers being affected. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, this is a one frame tween, so it doesn't really have to be perfect or anything. Okay, that's it. Now, watch the magic happen. See? Okay, so now having done that, would it be even cleaner if I duplicated this all the way back to here and then said, okay, let's just give him some slightly more calm eyebrows. So what I've been finding is that while I'm reticent to wind up with 10 trillion layers that I constantly have to scroll to wade through, I have been finding pretty consistently that having separate layers for eyebrows, eyes meaning pupils, and blinks, and mouth. Mouth, eyes, eyebrows, blinks are the biggies. The blinks wind up just being inserted. Like right here, a great example of why you would use this. Let me just show you. Might as well use it. Let's go to the blinks layer. Okay, so the normal case with humans is that before they move, they blink. So right here, you would expect to see a blink. So I'm isolating the blinks layer, and here's what we're going to do. We're going to go D for draw mode. We're going to go into vertex paint mode, because it just makes, like, here are all my materials. In vertex paint mode, it's useful, and actually I'm just going to leave it as charcoal ink. I don't even need to change the material. Just go to vertex paint mode. Actually, let me strike that. To be perfectly careful, it would be better to switch to the Vertex Colors material. In other words, why? Well, because what if I wanted to hide them all at the material level as opposed to at the layer level? You could do it if they're all in one material. What am I saying? Sounds like gibberish. In other words, this material basically contains all of the paint, well, not all of it, most of it, I should say, because for the simple reason that I didn't go to this system until I was partway into the project. Earlier, I was creating materials, Tobias's skin, Tobias's hair, blah, 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 blah. And then, 2 weeks ago or whatever, I'm like, this is going to get really unwieldy once I add all the colors for all the characters. And the only advantage of doing so is that if the color I pick isn't quite right, I can always change it, procedurally. After the fact, I can always change it later. But I'm saying to myself, well, in practice, how often do I really need to do that? Once you know who your characters are and you kind of have a palette for them, you really shouldn't need to be changing it, for the simple reason that if I wanted to change it, it's easy to do in Krita. Just by, with a curves, tool or whatever, just modify the color, right? You can isolate the colors pretty easily in Krita, in the rare instance that you actually have an issue. Hey, Full Chain, dude, I'm excited that you're here. I'm glad to see you, buddy. Okay. In fact, Full Chain, I'm so excited to see you that I'm going to say, I don't know if you're in the loop, man, but dude, take a look. Shh. I am up to 15 minutes into episode 3. Cool, huh? Anyway, okay, so on the blinks layer, what I'm coming around to is I switch it to the Vertex Colors material just to keep them all sort of in the same bag if I need to make a global modification. Well, okay, actually, let me give you a real-world example where this actually makes sense. I'll give you a real-world example where it makes sense. If all of the fills for the show are tied to the Vertex Colors material, then that means I can turn all of the color off just by turning this off. Now, here we'll see it doesn't seem to work because this is probably a legacy thing that was colored earlier. But in a perfect world where I was doing it this way from the very start, I would be able to turn this off and all of the colors in the show would disappear. You say, well, why is that useful? It's useful because when the process of working out the shots causes me to want to have these extra layers for blinks and eyebrows and the pupils of the eyes and the mouth, I'm not having to go through and turn these off one by one. And by the way, if I did turn these off, it would turn off the lines. So that doesn't really work. If everything is on the fills layer, which is the way it is here, then I can turn it off all in one swoop. So why would you not just say all the colors in the fill layer? Here's why. A lot of times, and you're about to see it here in a moment, there are cases where it actually makes more sense to have the color baked into the layer. And a great example would be blinks. In the blinks layer, I want to have the color and the lines just all together for the simple reason that you want this to definitely always be over top of everything else. Anyway, I belabor the point. Let's just go to the blinks layer as we were doing, and we'll get around to details. Okay, so anyway, materials wise, now that I have the Vertex Colors material, it's great because every character has an individual palette. So now I just go to the Vespar palette and there's his skin color. Okay, now, honestly, do my eyes deceive me? I'm not totally sure that color looks right. Well, I can find out. Here's how I find out. I'll just sample this color. Yeah, this looks... Okay, by the way, friends, just be aware. I almost made a mistake here. Dragging and dropping doesn't move this entry. Now I can do it this way just because that's the color I wanted to change anyway. But if you're going to move them, normally you want to use these little buttons, because dragging and dropping does not move them. What it does is it transfers this one's color to this slot, as it were. Okay. Anyway, I needed the blink color so that I can now just go in and draw a blink. Just that simple. Okay. If I want to, golly, let's do it this way. It's useful in the palette to have the regular draw color. So now I'm going to switch back to my drawing and just tighten up this bit here. Okay. And then what I'll do is I'll go to the next frame and just hit I for insert a keyframe, inserts a blank keyframe, and now Wango Bango Vespar blinks before he moves, which is exactly what real people do. Okay, well, don't you want to maybe blink? Boom, like right there, a blink would feel good again, wouldn't it? And so as you can see, this is a case where, whoopsie, let's go, okay, actually, let me redo. That's interesting. That's interesting. When I hit undo, it didn't just undo my last stroke. It undid the stroke, got rid of the keyframe, and threw me back to here. So that's kind of strange, in my opinion. Well, we're on the blinks layer, so that means I can go like this, and it's easy to delete my mistake because I can't accidentally grab something I didn't mean to grab. So, all right. So what we want here is actually to go back to his palette and smack this in here, and we'll just do the same thing we did before. So, and by the way, I've said many times to you guys that my productivity when I live stream is quite a bit worse than normal, and this would be a good example of it. Everything I'm showing right here about the layers and the hotkeys and the, you know, everything, it's all superfluous for me, meaning that what has taken probably 15 minutes to do here would actually take me like 4 minutes if I was just working. That's another reason why I haven't been live streaming as much, although it's really more because I've got other stuff I'm working on. Okay, now going forward, my basic mode of operation has been to let's see if I remember the hotkey. I believe it's 8. Yeah. Okay. So I have a RAM drive on my computer. Tom asked me at one point what RAM drive I use. So if anybody's curious, I can reiterate. Otherwise, I'll assume you don't care. I do work pretty fast. Chiziapo. I do tend to be on the fast side. In everything, really. You know, as a writer. Okay, so let me look at, I'm going to pause here and look at Tom's comments here. Is that something that will be affected by proportional control? I don't believe that proportional editing tool has any effect on scaling keys. I'm very sure. What you're seeing, the way it sort of squiggles and grows and they separate out at a different pace, is a function of the fact that the keyframes have to fall on the border of a keyframe. So what happens is if I scale 11%, you know, the software has to say to itself, okay, well, you scaled 11%. What does that mean to the keyframes? In that, you know, you can't go 11% of the way from frame 32 to frame 34. You're either on one or the other. Now, the interesting thing about that, actually, I'm kind of glad you asked that because it's an interesting thing to ponder. Okay, if we grab these, the useful thing about the way Blender works is that everything works the same way pretty much everywhere. Meaning scaling a 3D model or a grease pencil object and scaling keys, they're all using the S key. And the anchor point, like up here, just to express the difference here, the up here, if I hit the period key, I'm going to decide what is the center of rotation and scaling. Usually it's either going to be the 3D cursor that's on the screen, that's this little widget here, or it's going to be the median point of whatever's selected. For me, it's almost always one or the other. I hardly ever use these other ones. Down here, how does it decide what the center of scaling is? Well, it's wherever the playhead is. So if the playhead's here, this is what's interesting about it. Now if I hit scale, you can see that it's scaling from there. And you can see that it's slowly ferreting out, based on the percentage of scaling, which one to move first, right? Whereas if I put it here and hit scale, watch what happens. They scale in the other direction. So this is effectively this. It's my pivot point, the playhead. Okay, so now proportional editing, I don't think has any. Well, according to this, it does. Okay, so forget what I said. I've had it off. I have no idea what this is going to do. Let me hit scale. And I turned this on. And now when I hit scale, literally nothing happens. So in fact, when I hit G, nothing happens. So I have no explanation for that. I have no idea. I don't know what the application would be, honestly. It does seem to almost have an effect because of the way the scaling happens, but let's leave that lie. I think the best advice to anybody using Blender is just get used to the way it works. Basically, as I scale, I'm going one frame at a time, and I keep going further and further. And if I'm back here, that calculation is a little different. You can see it's a lot more jumpy bumpy, right? So anyway, it's very intuitive. You know, just get used to it because the way it works is extremely intuitive and it's easy to work with. So anyway, getting back to what I said earlier, the way I've been operating is I just hit Control F12. I don't care what frames I'm on. I don't care blah, 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 anything. It just all renders to the RAM drive. Okay, with the caveat that with this tool here, which is a plugin, it's the Loom plugin, I can select just these layers and have just the layers, just the keyframes that are selected, have them render. I've been using it less than I thought I would because of normally once I bring it into Krita, I'm either going to tweak the animation there, just doing it the Krita way, or I'm not going to do it at all. I'm just there to basically deal with the background and stuff. So anyway, let's follow the signal flow here. I just rendered this shot into the RAM drive. Okay, just for the record, it's not the worst idea ever when you're at the end of a scene, like here on 580, to just do a I key and insert keyframes on all channels. Just because, let me see if that, you know, I mean, effectively that means you really need to make the end, which is Control End with your mouse over the timeline, bring it back one frame, right? So anyway, there it is, and let's just look at how this works. Well, what I'm going to do is this shot would be 91E, right? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to jump over here, and it would be 91C. This shot is based on 91C, so that makes it simple. I'm going to go to 91C. I'm going to take this, delete it, and then I'm going to import the animation frames from the RAM drive. Once they come in from the RAM drive, as you guys probably know, they don't need to be preserved anymore on the RAM drive. Okay, by the way, yes, I noticed that I forgot Vespar's mouth. So we'll add it back in, and then that's cool because that gives me an opportunity to kind of show you guys something else. What I was talking about with the Loom plugin. So let's hit the tilde key and isolate the mouth layer. Go back to the beginning of the shot. All right, so now I'm going to switch my materials. I've got my ink pen. I don't want to be in vertex color mode. I do want to use charcoal ink, which is my standard color I use for I hate that when my brain farts because I'm in the middle of a sentence, but I'm thinking about what I'm doing. So bear with me, friends. Anyway, charcoal ink material, mouth layer, ink pen, no vertex paint. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say on the mouth layer, I'm going to actually just put a key here. Actually, no. I'm going to delete that key. And then I'm just going to hit in sculpt mode. Best bar is confused. Okay, so now my standard practice would be to Shift D, duplicate this to here, go back one frame, hit Control Shift E with my mouse over this region, and poop, it doesn't work. Doesn't work in sculpt mode. Got to hit the D key so I'm back in draw mode, or be in edit mode. Edit mode's fine too. Either way, that's what you if you want to interpolate. So Shift Control E will automatically put in the tween. So you can see his mouth move quite nicely. Or hit the undo. Okay, so I'm hitting Z. Okay, or you can go, I gotta remember what the hotkey is. I believe it is it just Control E? I think it is. Let me hit Control E. Yes. Control E lets you decide where you want this tween to go relative to the other two tweens. So in my case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, yeah, I want it to go a little and then snap to the new position. So let's do that. Get it? So Control E is a manual tween, and Control Shift E is an automatic tween. Okay, so here we go. Let's take this. We've got 4 keys here, don't we? All right. I'm going to go to the RAM drive and delete these. Don't need them anymore. Why? Because once they're brought into Krita, they're baked into the Krita file. Effectively, Krita is a file system. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Loom to render the active, or render the selected keyframes. And I'm going to use the command line, so it's really, really fast. And now when I look at my, and I might get a surprise here. Ah, okay. Guys, it would appear that you really do need to completely isolate this layer visually. I did not know that, so I'm going to come over here and go hide others. Okay? And frankly, I hate to say it, but if you're going to hide the others, there's not really a great reason to use Loom, but I'm going to show it anyway because it is kind of interesting. So you're going to have these 4 keys. Now this is the interesting part about that. Over here now, I've got 4 keyframes, and based on their numbers, they're not sequential, right? Because Blender only rendered the frames where something has changed. It didn't render all the frames in between. So that's a useful thing. The main problem with it is when you go to import them into Krita, okay, you can add hold frames automatically, which means Krita is going to respect the distance between the keyframes. The problem is, because this starts on frame 500, it's going to bring them in way the heck downstream. That's actually why I haven't been using this methodology as much, because I wind up having to go scroll down to frame 500 and drag all the keyframes back. I'm going to begin frames from index 0 and see if that helps. See, the first imported frame will be placed at 0 instead of 1. Huh. Okay, so this really has no effect. So you'll see here what I'm talking about. So it brought these in, and they're brutally far downstream here. As I say, 500 some C. So that's not that useful. Now what I'm going to do is click there, shift, click there, and then I'm going to do remove frame and pull. So that helped. Okay, let me see. What is it that's not? I'm actually wondering. Let me look at this. Oh yeah, Krita. I hate the way Krita does not it doesn't pin layers to the timeline. And if you're moving fast and or have a complicated scene, that can actually become kind of problematic. But anyway, let's keep moving. Okay, so I see a little bit of a thingy dingy here with the shadows. I did not put the tweens in the shadows. So, okay, what does that mean? It means in practice, this was for demonstration purposes only, because now I can re-render it with the mouth in there. It means secondarily, this might as well be deleted because I need to re-render it anyway. So I'm going to turn off the sketch layer. Got it? So I'm just going to do the basic thing. And you can see, let me actually double check this. I think I need to, yeah, right there you can see it. Okay, so this is an error. This is what is called an error. Let's make sure, okay, it is SHD2. This is the layer I'm interested in. And I'm going to kill this erroneous keyframe. And hopefully I can just put in an automagic tween. Yep, now it's perfect. Control F12. So as I say, everything's moving a little slower than if I was not doing the live streaming thing, but we're moving along. Tom, I've played around with the settings. I've played around with all kinds of settings on that, of which there are not many, but basically the answer is I haven't been able to find a way to do it. If Krita is going to respect the hold frames, there's no way to tell it, yeah, respect the hold frames, so only bring in the frames and put them relative to each other where they belong, like it did, but start at frame 0 or frame 1. Looks like start at 0 just means it's going to start at 0 instead of 1, but it's still going to begin the actual import based on the frame number baked into the numbers. So if you want to, you know, trying to work around things with Kritas is probably less preferred to simply finding a better way. And I think that the better way would be, and I haven't looked into it, but the better way would be, is there a way in Blender to tell Blender that no matter what I'm rendering, always start at frame 0, right? So this would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That may be just a render setting. It seems like it would. It seems like something Blender would really time remapping. No, that's for speeding things up and slowing them down. So I don't know. If somebody out there knows, let me know. But yeah, it would be, my preference would be no matter what I ever render from Blender, and no matter where it is on a massive timeline, it still starts out with a 0000 index on the frame and counts up from there. So if there is such a setting, friends, you guys let me know, because I would love to know about it. I'm just not sure. Okay, so back to work. File, we want to import the animation frames. So the disadvantage of doing it this way, so the advantage is, okay, now this is interesting. Oh, I know what it is. Yes, they're numbered that way, but we're not using this. If we don't use this, which is kind of crazy because these two should be completely deflated from each other. They shouldn't be conflated. Adding the hold frames and doing the counting properly versus the question of where you begin to, you know, the import really have nothing to do with each other. They're two completely different factors. But anyway, not the end of the world. So we just move this down to here, and then what we'll do is immediately save this. And we're going to save it as boop. New folder 03. Whoops. Be careful. 03-91-E. Poof. And then just for simplicity, I'm going to hit Control C. Go in here, hit Control V, save that. And then the key thing here you don't want to forget is change this as well. And boom. Now I haven't even looked at, you know, I haven't looked closely at this, but let's just go over to, you know, you can see why this has been pretty efficient. Like boom, 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 boom. Open the sequence. Why did it do 300? Okay, I know. Never mind. Okay. Cancel that. Okay, so now we've run into another stupidity about Krita. At least it's my opinion that it's stupid, but maybe some people can think of a way that it's a good thing. Which is this. It ties in with the importing thing and the hold frames. Okay, and I forgot, so forgive me for forgetting. What I forgot was that if Krita imports the frames, wants to respect the hold frames, which means it's going to count based on the file numbers no matter what you do, well, there's another dirty little secret about that, and the dirty little secret is just by virtue of having imported something that was way downstream, Krita said, oh, you must want to change the length of what you're going to render to wherever we ended up putting those, which obviously is pretty brain dead, right? That's brain dead. That's stupid. Of course you don't. But maybe you do. No, it's not actually brain dead. It's not the worst thing ever, but I would prefer to have the option, you know, in terms of how it's going to behave. So, yeah, that's just all there is to that. So now we got a little bit of a problem because we need to go to, well, shoot, let's go to, I don't want to show that stuff. That's, that is the material that is kind of proprietary. Why am I floundering about here? Well, because, see, actually the only thing I dislike about this image viewer is that you have to manually refresh it. I can kind of see the point. I mean, it's not a bad thing. But if you forget that you need to refresh it, then you're going, where are my files? You need to hit F5 so you see them. Okay, so back to Krita. All right, so this is, let's see, did I ever bring in? Okay, I never, by the way, Tom's over there. I'm not even looking, but I would bet you any amount of money right now Tom doing art is in the chat screaming, Dave, you're on the wrong screen. Yeah. Well, there you go. Doesn't it go to show, like today, when I switched screens a little bit ago, that's the first time today I switched screens. And sure as shit, what happens? I forget to switch back. Dave. You are such a goof. Okay. Boom, boom, boom. So all these things that I'm saying are so lickety-split and quick and easy. Turn out to be a little bit clunky and slow. All right, there it is. Now let's make sure everything's looking okay. Blah, 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 blah. Little comment. Works for me. Transition back. And so now I'm going to take my medicine like a man. I'm going to go look at the chat, and I know Tom's screeching about it. He isn't. I can't believe it. Tom must have left. There's no way Tom... Correct me, Tom. If you're there, Tom, and I'm wrong, you correct me. But I'm saying Tom doing art has to have left the building. because if you let me think about this for a minute. Anyway, Tom's left the building because if Tom was here and he saw me stuck on the wrong screen, he would be screeching in the you're multitasking. Okay, so Tom, I got a job for you. I got a job for you if you're interested. Let's see. I'd have to pull up the Python, but basically, if we look at the Loom source code, honestly, and I could do it. I'm just throwing this out there, but if you simply subtracted the current frame number from the well, whatever frame we're on, subtract that in order to generate the 4-digit image sequence. I don't know if you can control that in Blender, but if you could, all you have to do is just subtract whatever frame we're on. You know, subtract. Well, to be fair, I'm sorry. You would subtract the initial frame. So instead of being 0561, this would be 0, and then this would be 0001. So you just, wherever you're starting gets subtracted, and then when Blender generates the frame numbers, that would make everything always render from frame 0. That would be super duper useful. But do we want to go there live? Do we want to go there live on I can't resist. I am on the other screen right now. I'm going to Blender 2.93, and I'm just going to take a quick look and see what I got. I think it'd be under Python. No, it wouldn't be under Python. It'd be under scripts. Add-ons. I'm looking for Loom. I think Loom is a, yep. Loom is a single. Okay. Yeah, Loom is a single file. It's literally just one file. So I'd have to look at this. I'm not really a Python guy, but Python's a pretty easy language, that's for sure. So just looking at the code, all we have to do is figure out where it determines the frame number and subtract the starting frame number from that number before it generates the 4 digits, which obviously the 4 digits are really more of a string. I mean, they're really a string, not a number. So I'm just taking a moment to scan this code. It's very beautiful code. I mean, this guy is not verbose like I am in terms of commenting, which I can definitely prove. I can actually prove right here. My screenplay software that I showed at the beginning here, you look at this, all the green, everything green is comments. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of code. Everything else is commentary. So I'm a little weird that way. I'm super verbose because my assumption is always that I am not going to remember what I did. But if you're a JavaScript person, you probably would appreciate my code because it's pretty easy to ferret out what's going on and how things work. So anyway, but back to the Python. So I would have to look at this and see if see how hard it is to find the code related to doing this is all interface code here. But anyway, you guys get the idea. The code related to determining what frames we're going to render. You know, that's what you'd be wanting to look at. So if you, yeah, it's not a bad idea, Tom. I may do that. I've been using, actually I was using not GPT. I use GPT a little bit, but mainly I was using Pi.ai. I like Pi because she talks to me and she's got a nice voice. You know, it's just another large language model. And frankly, when it comes to coding, she's going to be wrong. I say she. Obviously, it's an AI, but because it's a girl's voice, I call it she. But she's going to be wrong. Golly. You know, roughly half the time. Roughly half the time. Yeah, search for at start frame or frame. That's a good idea. Okay, Tom, well, you got me thinking, so let's just do that. Find frame. And filter frames. Increment. I'm definitely not in a frame of mind to figure this out right now and really think about it, but Tom's got the right idea, no question. Here's the frame range. Okay, so right there, and there's start. So where is start? Right up here. So yeah, starts min. So it's going to be somewhere in here, which is kind of towards the top. This is line number 136. I suspect, you know, don't listen to me, but I'm saying I expect that probably the answer is somewhere in this region of the script. Now, that's the beautiful thing about, you know, Python and JavaScript. You know, scripting languages are awesome, and compiled code is almost never necessary. It's why I like the idea of coding applications that run in the browser. You know, like this. This is all JavaScript and PHP. And the only thing, literally the only thing PHP is used for is in the background. In fact, Tom, since you're here, you weren't here at the beginning, but you will find this interesting. I wrote this code over the weekend. And so what I did was I took my CMS, which is CM Simple. It's like a legacy CMS. It's abandonware, but I know it inside and out. And I use it for the commercial websites I do. Anyway, so what I did was I said, I want to be able to, I don't even want to have to log in here and use the editor. Like there's a built-in editor for the CMS, ostensibly so customers, you know, a customer could log into their own website and make changes. In practice, nobody ever does. They just call me and, you know, the change is done 5 minutes later. But I'm like, I don't even want to log in. I want to declare war on the CMS such that the only reason I even have the CMS is for the navigation system, meaning content here. Actually, if you took this introduction to the Salt and Light stuff out, you can see that this is the entire, and by the way, this is superfluous. That's not even needed, nor is that. So this is the entire navigation system of the website. So you see home, Salt and Light, H2, which means submenu, right? So you can see a human being can look at this and basically tell what's going on. You've got a category, Salt and Light, and underneath it, you've got 3 episodes, right? So you can see what the website is. Now, I don't want to keep that because I did have some introductory material that is baked into the content for Salt and Light, for no good reason, by the way, since I'm the only one using this. But okay, but I love that. That's like so simple. You can just look at it and go, oh, I see what's going on. Okay, so then all the JavaScript is basically in these 2 files, and what it does is it lets me go to any page in the website and immediately just click on it and start typing. And I say, well, I want this to be like a slug line. Okay, there it's a slug line. And there's a little bit of a bug here with the slug line specifically where you have to, you guys kind of saw something happen there that was a little egregious. It's basically the only thing that is egregious about it. Here is, I don't want to be in caps lock mode. So here is dialogue, right? And if I hit Control 2, or I'm sorry, Alt 2, it becomes dialogue. If I hit Alt 1, it becomes a character. Angrily. If I hit Alt 3, it's a parenthetical. Slug lines, commentary. You could have a transition like wipe to, and that would be, you just hit Alt 5, and everything's formatted properly. And if you like what's going on, you just hit this, It saves it to the server. If you want to print it, you can print it out as a PDF. And as you work, as you go along, it continually updates this bit of this list of bookmarks so that you can jump to wherever you want to jump to in the script and get to work. So anyway, like I said, I wrote it over the weekend. It's something I've been thinking about doing for literally years. I mean, like, man, I just want a web-based screenwriter that generates a properly Hollywood formatted screenplay that I can just go in and just start writing. Just go. And so I finally said, nobody's doing it, so I'm going to do it myself. Okay. Are we ever going to get back to work here? Yes, we are. I'm going to pull up the screenplay actually for this episode, because as a matter of fact, that's what I need to look at right now to figure out where I'm at. So in case you're confused, so what I do on this is what's on the other screen. So right now, poof. Yep, this is the scene we're working on right now. So basically, Vespar's complaining. So as I play this, it starts out with Vespar going, "That blasted Asher." He's like, "Asher? If it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be in this mess," says Golik. You get the idea? And so then, so that's what I do on my other screen. I just follow along, and that's what keeps me on track. So anyway, I mentioned earlier, if anybody thinks that's cool and wants this screenwriter software, I'll find a way to get it to you. No big deal. But it was fun. I mean, it took the whole weekend because I'm not shitting you. Every single step, there was a gotcha. There was a gotcha literally at every step. What do I mean by a gotcha? What would be a good example of it? It's actually, after going through it, it's actually hard to think what the gotchas are. One of the most difficult things, okay, I'm going to actually wax philosophical here for half a second because this is actually kind of interesting. So you guys may not think it's interesting. We'll see, but give me a moment and indulge me. What I did here was I used a property of HTML called content editable. Okay. So if you're like a Visual Basic type person or whatever, you're probably familiar with the old custom controls that created like a rich text format text box. So it's a really crude editor that has the basic hotkeys for, like, I could make this, Control B would make it bold, I assume. Does it? Yeah. Bold, italic. So the basic formatting is possible. And I'll just refresh that so it erases my changes. There's even a fundamental undo. Like if I type for a while and hit Control Z, it'll just get rid of everything I typed since I started this session. So it's crude, but it is there. But the interesting thing about it that I thought was really, I had to think about, was it turns out that within a div or a section of a website that you call content editable so you can start actually typing in it, it's actually harder than you think to know where you are. In other words, how do you programmatically know that you're at this location in the document? That's the tricky thing. It's harder than you think. You can do it, but it's harder than you think. You have to you have some complex selectors that get you down into it and figure out somewhat by process of elimination where you must be. So philosophical, what I mean by that is I thought it was really interesting that one of the harder things is context. And I really thought about how it applies to life in general, especially in the turbulent times we're living in right now. People get into political discussions and stuff. Right? You've all done it. Human beings have every one of us has a mental model in our mind. In other words, we have a model in our mind of a context that we fit into. And by the way, I'm going to keep rocking here. Just keep doing what I was saying before. Hit go. Oh, stop everything. You have to allow it. For me, it's the tilde key. Just move this downstream. Okay, so for me, for this scene, this frame, 583, is going to be the start frame. So control home. And I have no idea how long it's going to be. So from 83 to 90, 99, oh, who knows? If it's not long enough, we'll change it. But okay, so, and I save my work. Typically when I change my range, I save it. So I can come right back to it if I have to wrap it up. So it's interesting to me because all human beings have a mental model in their mind of who they are as a person, how they see themselves, and how they see their counterpart that they're engaging with. And this mental model is always, 100% of the time, woefully incomplete. It's actually why you really want to be a collectivist. Okay? The opposite of a collectivist is, I don't need to consider your point of view or even understand you or anything. All I need to do is have my own mythology in my mind. You can guess what mythologies I'm referring to, but some of them are ideological, some of them are religious. It doesn't matter. I've got a model in my mind, and the lie that goes with rigid ideology is that all of the answers are provided from the past. All of the answers were provided in the past because maybe I have a book or a document, something that I say, I assert is perfect. It is perfect. It was perfect when it was created. And for all time, immemorial, that document is the framework for understanding your world and your life and yourself and your fate. And those documents tend to include all sorts of things that you can't prove. Like, things like what happens after you die. That's one extreme. The other extreme says, well, no, that's stupid. I don't, my mental model can't be based on a damn book or document. I mean, there may be wisdom that can be gleaned from that document, just like you can glean wisdom from, you can watch watch The Little Mermaid. You'll probably, there's probably some useful little life lesson in there somewhere. It's all good. But if you're going to smack somebody upside the head because they didn't show proper respect to the spirit of King Triton, well, you're probably going to run into some resistance. So this is the difference. We all have a mental model. The question is, where does it come from? If you're open and you're unafraid and you're secure in yourself, then you have no problem engaging with anyone, even if they disagree with you vehemently. That's okay. We can actually disagree really, really vehemently and still be friends. Absolutely. Why? Well, because what is life? Life is just the exploration of ideas. So when you come to the table to explore ideas, or deal with a group or a team situation, or deal with a family member, or deal with a political, somebody who's on the other side of the aisle from you, the best vantage point to come from is to assume whatever mental model I have in my mind, know in advance that that mental model may be accurate in some ways, for sure. Right? It may have many aspects to it that happen to be accurate, but your core assumption as a person engaging with your world should be that I know for a fact that my mental model is incomplete and probably in some ways really inaccurate. Why? Because I don't know the mind of the person I'm dealing with. And so what we have to do is we have to figure out what our common ground is. How do our mental models compare? Okay? So if you're going to talk about, for example, the things that are going on with Doge and Elon Musk and all that sort of stuff. I'll take 30 seconds to tell you why I think it's all kind of silly and stupid. In 2020, Trump said fraud about the election, and then there were many court cases and evidence brought forth and blah, blah, blah. And basically, he, at 100% of the time, it was shown that this outcry about fraud was either wrong or actually just a lie. And we're in the same boat today. What we're saying is Social Security fraud, 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 fraud. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's a playbook we've seen before. So anybody, if so, for me, this is my model. My model says, well, I've got several year history here that says that if Donald Trump claims that anything is fraud, what he's really saying is, I am magical. I know everything. I've always known everything. And if I say it, it must be true. Because that's what happened in 2020. We witnessed it. We saw it. Now, can you argue, well, yeah, but there was this thing about the election that was a little questionable. There's that. No, that's fine. That may be true. There may be aspects that were a little winky here and there and somewhere. No problem. I have no problem dealing with facts, even if the facts don't favor my political ideology. I don't care. At the end of the day, I would rather know the facts. So anyway, my point being that if somebody comes to a conversation with you about Doge and their mental model is, number one, Elon Musk is rich, richest guy in the world, therefore he must be brilliant, therefore anything he does is good. Right? Most people that would be watching my channel would probably look at that mindset and go, well, that's about as stupid as it gets, just because it's so hopelessly naive. Right? It may, in fact, be true. This is an important thing to notice, that ridiculous, polarizing mental models actually could turn out to be right. That's a really important thing to remember. The person who's violently opposed to you politically or spiritually or whatever, it could turn out that they're the one who's right. But on balance, common sense says we're going to be a little more measured in our assessment. Meaning, in the topic of fraud, if Don and Elon say, oh my God, we're just finding fraud everywhere, it's enormously more likely that they're saying that not because it's true, but because they want you to believe it for some reason. You see? It may not be the case. They may be absolutely accurate in their reporting. They very well could be. But the likelihood is, no, this is just a ploy. And the truth's probably somewhere buried in the middle. Right? And so the question is, how do you figure out where, building your mental model of your counterpart and the person you're engaging with, the question becomes, okay, now I like that comment. Actually, Tom, let's run with that for a minute. You said you're straw manning based on limited information. Okay, so I like this because I'm guessing you might be a right-leaning guy. Not that it matters, because people who are naive in their handling of these mental models are always going to be quick to label. See, in other words, if you say something that reveals that maybe you were a Trump voter, let's say. If I am immature, if I am childish, then I want to label you a right-winger. I want to label you with something that gives me an excuse in my mental model then to disregard your opinion, or even to malign you and treat you poorly. This is the cognitive flaw that we all make a lot of the time. So now you're saying the straw man would be, I've heard some things about Doge or Social Security or fraud, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding you here. So I just made the argument that based on what we saw in the past with Donald Trump, we should look with a little bit of a jaundiced eye at any claims of fraud. And you're saying that's a straw man, which I don't think straw man's actually the correct cognitive flaw that is revealed by that. But you could say it is, because you could say that what happened in the past is a consideration that I have imposed on the consideration about Doge in order to assert that we should be very uncertain about the information we're being given. So the straw man is that you can't take what happened in the past and impose it on the present. Is that correct? Is that the point you were making when you said straw man there? Having access to the data, as the Doge team does, is something concrete to work from. There are layers of influence, bias, and showmanship on top of any truth. Yeah, absolutely. Those are all true. So now we're into the... So this is kind of cool, because in terms of my mental model and your mental model, what I see here is that we're both probably reasonably intelligent people. So that's cool. This is the sense that I've gotten. When in interviews, when the topic of what they're lumping together as fraud, waste, and abuse, when it comes up, let me give you the full report of the context I'm operating from and see if you feel my conclusions are wrong. Okay, so, and I state it that way so that I can be concise and quick about it. In interviews, what I see is, you saw it in the Rogan interview, for example. You've seen it in other places. Is when Elon talks about what he's finding with the whole Doge thing, and you saw it in the Oval Office presentation, a week or two ago, is that let's just pick on Social Security for a minute as just one government program. Okay, so you've got a program, and there's laws in place, and the laws say, here's your budget, and now here's how you spend that money, and then there's some discretion. Okay. So if there was waste, fraud, and abuse, it would have to be, if you're going to find it and have a legal basis to challenge what's going on, it would be on the basis of the discretionary aspect of it. Because if Congress, with the power of the purse, allocates that money and establishes it through legislation, then that's the way it's going to be, unless it's found unconstitutional, obviously. Okay. So the thing I found interesting was that Elon seemed to me to be very careful in his terminology, in that he's not saying, I looked at the legislatively dictated programs such as we've been operating with for all these years, and here is a specific example of what you might call fraud, waste, or abuse. At least in interviews, and it may be because in interviews you're kind of using shorthand and can't really get into the details and the nitty-gritty, but it quickly pivoted away from that to the absurdity of some of the things he was finding. The problem with it is that your role as an auditor, as it were, is to say, here's what the law says we should do. Is the law being broken? It is not your job to say, here's what the law says we should do. What's being done is within the purview of the law, but I think the choices that are being made are ridiculous. That's a perfectly valid opinion, but the problem is, it doesn't matter if you think it's ridiculous if it's in compliance with the law. Now, I know that to some people that seems naive and impotent, because it doesn't give you a good way to deal decisively and quickly with abuses that are patently ridiculous and obviously ridiculous to any normal person. But the problem with that argument, which is in fact true, is that we have legal mechanisms, arduous and laborious as they may be because of gridlock. We do have mechanisms in place to take that which has revealed itself to be somewhat wasteful or ridiculous and change it. We can change it. We have to change it legislatively. In other words, if you're going to go in and start firing people and cutting off the flow of funds and stuff, is the only legal way you could do that is if, and obviously you'd have to, what really should happen is then, what really would happen is you would gather your data, you would go before Congress, you would report it, and then it would be up to Congress or DOJ to go ahead and pursue what you found legally or legislatively. So if you're just coming in, the worst case scenario is you come in and you unilaterally say, what Elon said in the podcast with Joe Rogan. He said, Social Security is the biggest Ponzi scheme in history. The problem with that statement is that it's actually kind of true, but it was designed that way. We all understand that. The whole idea from the start is that the people that are healthy and working now are paying into a system, and the collectors of Social Security are going to be the people that are at retirement now. So you're banking on the fact that we as a collectivist American culture all agree that it's in the best interest of all of us to pool our resources in order to provide some semblance of financial security to the aged, to people who are retired and or getting old. So now, if you put the noun or the adjective, I guess it would actually be a noun, but if you put the label on that of Ponzi scheme, this is the worst kind of word in normal human discourse. The worst words are nouns that have adjectives baked into them that you're applying to a situation. Like I call it a Ponzi scheme. Well, that's a noun, but there's a lot of adjective baked into that noun. There's a lot. It's a very negative connotation, as if it's something bad. And so my personal assertion would be that anybody that's at the level of responsibility that Elon Musk is to even use that terminology is hopelessly irresponsible. In other words, why would you do that unless your whole point is to manipulate the emotions of your audience? In order to justify ultimately changing something, not because it's illegal or there's malfeasance, but because you don't like it. So what you're trying to do in that scenario, and obviously these are assumptions, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to soften up the American people to get used to the idea of that terminology so that within a month or so, the word Ponzi scheme is just being bandied around all over the place on social media and in the news. And as we get used to it, then we kind of accept the idea, yeah, it's a Ponzi scheme. Yeah, that's really bad. And so you're backfilling your understanding of the situation based on the label, which is insane. It's as childish and naive as you can get because it actually ignores all the data. Okay, so anyway, going back here, you said straw manning layers. Okay, straw man is when you simply the opposing view to convenient representation. Yes, okay, fair enough. Okay, fair enough. So Trump lying about fraud is a straw man, even if we can prove he did it in 2020. To be accurate, it's a straw man by applying that to today because we can't assume that he's doing now what he did back then. It's my observation that, you know, the apple, well, not apple doesn't fall from the tree. That would be about his children. But, you know, generally people do what people do. And so I would be hesitant to assume that this is different. And by the way, the interesting thing that underlies all of that is it isn't to assert that everything about Social Security or any other government program is good or efficient or any of the above. There are plenty of things to fix. The issue right now has less to do with whether we should look at it as the manner in which it's being done, being so disruptive on multiple levels. I was in the middle of checking if Power Rename from Power Toys can rename from. Oh, I've got a Tom. I have a little software tool, by the way. Let me pull it up because you guys, it may be useful. Right here, this little tool. Look it up. AF5 Renamer. This is a really well-written little program, and it will allow you to take any batch of files and completely rename them, number them, add a dash or an underscore or a string wherever you want. Extremely great, awesome little utility. It just does one thing and it does it perfectly. AF5 Renamer. So I already have a tool that does that if I wanted to go to the trouble of doing it. So anyway, I'm going to have to wrap up here actually. I think you're going to lose your audience talking politics. That doesn't matter to me, Tom. I'm gonna insert right now. I couldn't care less about that. I couldn't care less. You know why? Because as I've said here, number one, the audience on the YouTube channel is literally what you see right now. There's 2 people here. Nobody gives a shit about my YouTube channel. They never have, and they never will. And that's okay. I don't care. Number 2, Salt and Light was out for 2 years, during which I didn't live stream like hardly at all. And so there's no correlation to my YouTube channel and the sales of my show. At the end of the day, in terms of priorities, I'm 85% concerned about the sales of my show. I'm 15% concerned about building a YouTube audience. Couldn't care less. I only do it because it's kind of fun and I like you guys. You know, the little small cadre of people that do follow me are a really neat little group of people. Right, so I don't care. You say, well, you might lose your. I don't care if I lose my audience. You know, if you have better things to do, go do them. Because I'm doing what I want to do, and what I'm doing is working. So I don't care if somebody wants to pay attention or not. Everything you say applies regardless of who is in power. People voted on final outcome, the way things are going. That's right. You're right, and it's a worthy point to make. You know, as progressively minded as I may generally be, look, the American people decided fair and square this time around that they wanted Donald Trump, and so I have to respect that. And there are a lot of things I don't like about what Joe Biden did, especially in regard to Israel. That's my opinion. No shade on anybody who's Jewish, because I love Jewish people. I have no issue with Israeli people, but in terms of Netanyahu and the policies and the Gaza thing, I have very strong opinions. And I would never want any harm to come to Israeli people either. I don't want any harm for anybody. Nobody has patience and cares about the details if the general trend seems healthy for the country. Correct. And at this point, it's way, way, way too early in the game to know. In fact, if you were going to interpolate, if you were going to project the last 4 weeks onto the rest of the Trump administration, you would probably guess that it's going to be very similar to the first Trump administration, where he does some things that seem kind of radical and disruptive to people, and then it winds up getting shut down in court because you really can't do it that way. And at the end of the day, it's really disruptive in the short term, but basically fairly impotent in terms of lasting policy changes in the long term. That's kind of the way I see it. That's just an opinion. I listen to Scott Adams. I like Scott Adams. He's a smart guy, and you got to respect a cartoonist that is a smart guy. I'd like to think I fall in that category, but maybe not. So you can run that program on a folder after you render as a finishing step. Yeah, of course you could. What you would do is you would like in my case, I'd go to the RAM drive, drag the files into the renamer, and then fill in the little drop down boxes. The problem with that is I don't think it would respect the distance between the numbers, right? So if you started it at 0 and the second frame, like what you rendered was 500 and the next frame was 560, I don't think the renamer would change it to 0 and 60. I think it would change it to 0, 1, 2. So I'd have to look at that. That's a clunky way to do it. The simpler solution for me is just render out of Blender without doing the frame numbers, and then bring it into Krita at the beginning and then just adjust. So anyway, my beautiful woman is up and about, and I want to go hang out with her for a bit. So with that, I'm going to wrap up this stream. It's been fun. Tom, I want to continue this one later, though, because I think you and I could share a beer and probably have a really interesting talk, and I'm suspecting I could probably learn something from you in the socio-political, domain, and certainly in the programming domain too. So anyway, but that's it for me for now. I'm going to sign off, and as you guys know, there will be more later. I hope you guys found it useful today.